Hi, this is TapCat, and today we're going to talk about the recently revealed story mission from the XCOM 2 War of the Chosen DLC. Titled Lost and Abandoned, this is going to be a major event early in the campaign. Before we get into details, I need to give a warning for major story spoilers in the remainder of this video. This mission is pre-scripted to an extent that no other mission in XCOM 2 is, and if you don't want to know what happens, do yourself a favor and stop watching now. Everybody else, just stay tuned, because we finally got a significant amount of gameplay footage and learned quite a bit in the process. The Lost and Abandoned story mission will introduce us to two of the three Resistance faction's heroes, also the Lost, and offer the first confrontation with the Assassin. Let's start with the Lost first. We already knew that a kill shot against the Lost would result in something called a headshot that would make that attack a free action so that you can potentially keep attacking as long as there's more Lost in front of you and you still have ammunition. It turns out that headshot only applies to a vanilla attack with a ranged weapon. If you use a special attack like face-off, it might be very effective, but it will end your turn. Likewise, a lot of us were thinking that sword attacks might be a strong strategy against the Lost because you would literally never run out of ammunition, and slash even allows you to move as part of the attack. Unfortunately, melee attacks are not eligible for headshot, so you'll have to settle for turning the Lost into a puff of dust using a shotgun blast instead. Another tidbit we picked up is that there's a variant called the Dasher who are faster than the standard Lost. It wasn't clear that they're significantly more dangerous other than the obvious fact that a melee-only opponent who can get to you in fewer turns is inherently more of a threat, and I definitely recommend prioritize killing them accordingly. One thing I've wondered since we first learned about the Lost is just how easy they would be to kill in the first place. At least in this mission, they consistently had 2 to 4 health, which puts them in an interesting place while you still have tier 1 weapons. Pistols will only be guaranteed to one-shot the weakest of the Lost, and both the Skirmisher's Bullpup and our assault rifles could leave the toughest of them alive. This is going to offer some new choices during combat, because you could have by far your best chance to hit one with 4 health, while there are other targets with 2. Do you take the shot you're almost guaranteed to hit, but might end your turn even if you do? Or do you take lower percentage shots that are guaranteed kills if you hit them? And by the way, Lost do not use cover and have no innate defense, so we should generally have solid chances to hit, especially if you seek out high ground. Finally, there's the question of how the Lost scale up in difficulty. Unlike most enemies, they don't get more health. Instead, you'll face more and more of them as you increase the difficulty setting. The developer livestream was set to Commander, and even so, the numbers looked fairly manageable. We meet the Assassin in this mission, and in a rare exhibition of restraint on the part of the developers, our encounter will not be at full intensity, and she'll be easier to drive off than she will be in future missions. At least on Commander level, she had 15 health, and normally we would need to do that full amount of damage to drive her away. But during Lost and Abandoned, she was ready to leave when she had taken about half as much. Perhaps the most interesting thing we learned about the Assassin is that it appears she will be weak against the Reapers in every campaign. In an interview with IGN during E3, it was stated that each Chosen would be weak to one of the faction heroes, but that those pairings would be determined randomly with each campaign. But based on both the scripted events in this mission and comments Jake Solomon made during a live stream, it now appears that this is not the case. Each Chosen has been bedeviling a particular Resistance faction, and that faction has gotten effective at fighting against their particular nemesis over time. So the Assassin is weak to Reapers, the Hunter to Skirmishers, and the Warlock to Templars. Despite the earlier report, I believe those relationships will be constant throughout every campaign. Another enemy we'll meet in Lost and Abandoned is the Purifier. I've been wondering whether their flame attacks would be blocked by cover as easily as the flamethrower we've had access to, and it turns out that they are. It's definitely a plus that their primary weapon won't hurt you unless they're basically flanking your soldier, but just remember that they also carry incendiary grenades, and don't assume you're safe just because you're behind cover. Purifiers also have a chance to explode when they're killed, thanks to the tank of chemicals that feeds their flamethrowers. This is going to make melee attacks a very dodgy strategy at best, because one bad roll of the RNG could leave you decidedly crispy. We've talked a lot about the enemies we'll deal with, but we also saw more details about bonding between soldiers, as well as how we'll recruit our first Resistance faction hero. The setup for Lost and Abandoned is that Bradford has brokered a meeting between the Reapers and the Skirmishers. There's distrust on both sides, but they reluctantly agreed to meet in an abandoned city that was wiped out in the events of XCOM Enemy Unknown. We'll need to pick 2 squads of just 2 soldiers each. One will escort the Reaper to an extraction point, the other pair will escort the Skirmisher. This will give us a chance to try out each of the 2 heroes and get a sense of what they're like, or at least what they're like at squaddy level with just their basic abilities. The Reaper goes first, and Shadow definitely appears to come in handy as a scouting tool for as long as it lasts. We also have confirmation that moving does not run a risk of breaking Shadow, at least not as long as you don't move within the enemy's detection radius. That always seemed likely, but the semantics of the description they gave for the ability did concern me just a little, and I'm glad to nail that down. We also learned about another new ability that the Reaper can buy with action points at Corporal. Blood Trail will deal +1 damage to a target that has already been wounded that turn. Your other choice at Corporal will be Remote Start to blow up environmental explosives. Finally, it looks like the XCOM abilities available to the Reaper will vary from campaign to campaign. I've watched multiple gameplay videos, and both the specific abilities and the timing of when they're unlocked varied. This seems almost identical to the way it will work for our regular soldiers from now on, although the hero's choices might be more focused in the sense that there could be a smaller list to draw from. We'll see. Once the Reaper fights through the Lost to get to an extraction point, we'll meet our first Skirmisher. Our introduction to him is to watch while he frees an Advent Purifier from his mind control chip with an efficient, if less than completely sterile, bit of field surgery. When it comes to battle, the Skirmisher shows great flexibility with its grapple, as well as the ability to move after firing the bullpup. Unfortunately, he's not necessarily at his best against the Lost. His melee attack does sufficient damage to get kills, but it's not eligible for headshot. The bullpup, with its minimum damage of 3, is not guaranteed to get kills against the tougher Lost, and its small ammo capacity of 3 is also a serious liability in a fight where you want as many lethal shots per turn as possible. If you watched my video covering the inside look on the Skirmisher, then you'll know that I also raised a concern about whether the bullpup would have any inherent bonus for critical hits at close range. It turns out that the answer is no. Even at point-blank range, the Skirmisher will have no chance at a critical hit unless he's getting the 40% flanking bonus. And as a side note, any enemy that doesn't use cover, like the Lost, cannot be flanked, and therefore you won't get that bonus. For a weapon that's supposed to be better at close range, this seems like a significant weakness, and I'm thinking that a laser sight, Talon rounds, and an expanded magazine will be my early choices to make the bullpup a bit more fearsome. At any rate, you'll use the Skirmisher and his 2-man escort to fight a group of Advent soldiers and then more Lost. By this point, you'll have already fought Lost with the Reaper, but those were just regular pods of enemies on the map. In this phase, a specific story event will trigger the waves of Lost that we've heard about. From that point on, explosives will make them come faster, but they'll show up every couple of turns even if you do nothing. This is going to be a good preview of what it will be like to face them in the future, although they will have more health as the campaign progresses. The key is to keep moving forward as you kill them so that you can ultimately get to the extraction point. If you try to stand still and wait to move until every single target is down and you're nicely reloaded, you'll probably never get out of there. One opportunity this does bring to mind, though, is that dealing with hordes of Lost could be an opportunity to steer a lot of experience toward a soldier that's waiting for a promotion. And given the need for multiple squads and backups for your backups, getting leveled up faster would be very helpful. So if you've got things under control and one soldier is lagging on the promotion front, maybe sticking around for another turn or two and getting them as many kills as possible would be worth considering. The third and final phase of Lost and Abandoned will happen after you reach the Skirmisher's extraction point. For the first time, you'll control all 4 of the soldiers you brought, as well as the 2 heroes. I'm not going to go into a lot of details on the story, but the 2 faction heroes start to develop a grudging respect for each other, and you're looking golden when you reach the extraction point. Unfortunately, this is XCOM, and getting off this mission map with both heroes in tow is just not in the cards. You may have driven off the assassin earlier, but she comes back long enough for a quick snatch and grab on our new skirmisher buddy, just as we're taking off. This all happens in a cutscene, and there's no way to avoid it happening or choose which hero she takes. The end result is that you're starting with a Reaper, and will have to rescue the skirmisher if you want him back. Fortunately, you'll be able to take a covert action at some point to find his location, and there's a new type of stealth mission when you attempt the rescue. We also learned during the live stream that it's supposed to be pretty easy to get one of each faction hero, and if one gets killed, you'll get a replacement almost immediately. Getting a second of any of them, though, is supposed to be quite a bit tougher. Alright, just a few more odds and ends to wrap this up. First, we saw how to revive dazed units, and there were no major surprises. We knew that we'd need to move adjacent to the stunned unit, and then we just need to activate an ability to revive them, but it doesn't use an action. So the only real drawback to that is that you will need to get there with your first move if you want to revive on that same turn. We also saw an example of bonding, but this was only at the first level of bond, and everything worked exactly as had been previously described. Either soldier can use a free action to grant his bond mate an additional third action that turn. This is just once per mission, but used at the right time, it could offer a nice boost. And finally, for those of us that were hoping the fatigue system wouldn't prove too heavy-handed, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is that while all of the soldiers were at full or nearly full strength when they went on the mission, 3 of the 4 showed significant progress toward fatigue when they made it back to the Avenger. To be safe, it looks like you're going to need to rest after each mission, at least some of the time. The potentially good news is that Jake Solomon mentioned that resting for, quote, a few days to get that back would be enough. So hopefully you won't have to sit out more than 1 mission on a routine basis. But he's also mentioned needing 3 squads of soldiers and managing a much bigger roster than we're used to, so it definitely looks like this is going to be a significant issue that we'll have to manage throughout the campaign. Alright, if you found this video interesting, then please give it a like to help other people find it, especially for a channel my size. It really helps out. At any rate, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I hope we see you next time.